Hello, and welcome to another demo of the MySocket.io service. Today, I'm excited to talk a little bit about a new feature that we just built called Session Management. We're going to talk about the insights that we can give to sessions, how we can terminate sessions, and how something we call continuous access evaluation works. All right, so let's talk about that. But before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit more and level set about what MySocket is. And so the easiest way to think of MySocket is to think of it as a zero trust, sometimes clientless remote access VPN replacement. And so we're all familiar with remote access VPNs. Maybe you used Pulse or AnyConnect VPN or OpenVPN client or WireGuard or something like that in the past. So these are typical remote access VPNs. And what they do is they give you access to a network that you otherwise don't have access to, something like your corporate network, your data center network, or a private VPC or something. Which is great, but the only challenge with that is you have immediately a lot of lateral access. So basically, you become a member of this remote network, and typically from there on, further access is mostly granted based on the fact that you came from the private VPN network, so IP-based, but mostly you have a lot of lateral access. And that's a problem, and I think it's become painfully obviously recently with the ransomware attacks where, something gets infected and then it gets spread laterally and the damage continues. So does that mean that remote access is bad? Well, we still need remote access. And so what we really want is just very targeted remote access. So if I would like to make available a wiki server or a GitHub server or some kind of file sharing server that sits on my corporate network or in a private data center, I want to do that, but only that particular service on that particular port number or something like that, right? And also, access is granted based on identity, not based on the fact that I came from the private VPN network, right? So IP-based rules versus what we really want is identity-based rules. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, there's a few things involved. So we have authentication and identity. We do that by integrating with existing identity providers. Once we know for sure that you are who you are, in my case, Andre at Tunk.io, we go through what's called the Authorization Phase. And as an administrator of the MySocket services, you can specify as a set of zero trust rules what email addresses or what email domains have access to that particular service. And so you can really think of MySocket as a bouncer in the middle. Once you are authenticated and then authorized, we will let you through to the private resource, which is part 3, which is the network data plane. And the private resource has an outbound tunnel, an encrypted tunnel from, say, the wiki server or some kind of connector to MySocket as well. And then we kind of stitch these two sessions together. Very importantly to realize is that this private resource can be on NAT or a private VPC. It only needs outbound access, so it won't have to need a public IP address. And since MySocket sits in the middle as this bouncer, it checks everything. It can also do a lot of logging, and that's what we'll talk about today in terms of session management and authorization rules. Okay, so in other words, we're combining the remote access VPN use case with an identity-aware firewall that provides per-flow identity. It's very important. And access is determined based on identity, not based on IP addresses. And so we're that bouncer in the middle, and we'll provide very granular access and make sure that only those who should have access have access. So let's talk about this new feature, session management. So as a security administrator, it's very important that you know who is accessing what resources, when, from where, what were they doing, and how long were they there for. And so typically you need to know these things because of, good operational security, but they're also typically mandatory for various security compliance programs. So as of this week, we have that feature in our portal. You can find it here. So you go to your socket, you click on the socket details, in this case here, and you can see this new tab there. It's called Sessions. If you click on that, you can see all the live sessions that have been happening over the last few days. So this is a brand new socket, but you can see the start time, the end time, who authenticated, nice picture with it, email address, and from where. So that's sort of a new feature, and you can click around. So you could see exactly who has access to that, right? So another screenshot here is pretty neat. Cool. So I also would like to talk about something called continuous access evaluations. So sessions are created after a user successfully completes the authorization phase. And after that, we continuously check that the rules that were specified, as you do in the portal here, as part of your authorization. So let's go here. So for every Zero Trust service, you specify a bunch of email addresses, so email domains, or particular email addresses. So for this web-based or HTTP-based Zero Trust service, Zero Trust is enabled, and you give it a bunch of domains. So corp.com people have access to this domain, and we'll test this in a bit. But I also would like to give a contractor temporary access. So say, for example, atunk@gmail.com and andre@tunk.io, for example. I'm the contractor, and I should have access to this. So what happens is the security administrator gives me access to this resource, and now that is provisioned. So now that I'm authenticated, or when I'm going to authenticate, these three rules are evaluated. And if that's successful, it will let me in. So let's actually test this. So I'm going to go here, actually go there. We'll say HTTPS. There we go. So the first thing that happens is, okay, MySocket acts as this bouncer and says, okay, you would like to have access? Well, please let me know who you are. And once I know who you are, I'll make sure that you're allowed in. So what I'm going to do is authenticate it to my identity provider. And I'll use andre@tunk.io because that's the one that we specified. And so I'm now authenticated, and you could see that, okay, this is a little test web server, but this could be your wiki, your GitHub. It doesn't really matter. It's just a web server, and that works. Cool. So if I now go to sessions, I should see this live session. So I have, for this demo, set my laptop to UTC time. So it's 02:26, and you could see that is here. What's really cool is that this session management and logging is all real time. So if I refresh this now let's see, when did we refresh this? So 02:26:40 or so. So if I do this and see if that's updated, there you go, 02:26:39. And it's already updated, right? So that's all in real time. Cool. So now we have session management. You can see exactly who logged in from where and what. Okay, so now imagine that a few days later, this contractor seems kind of shady, or the engagement has ended, and so we'd like to change the rules again. And because we do continuous access evaluation, it's very important to realize that access is not determined or evaluated during the login. Sometimes this happens. Certain other services, they will, when you authenticate, they will authorize you, and they will create a session or a token, and then embedded in there is what you have access to. We don't do that. We do it for every request in the Edge proxies. We'll double check if it's still valid. So what I'm going to do here is remove these two email addresses again and say update socket. And so what happens now is this is being synchronized around the world instantly. And so the question is, what do we expect to happen, right? So I, as a security administrator, expect that only corp.com email addresses still have access. So the question is, what happens if I refresh now? What will I see in the session thing? So let's just go there, see what happens. Let me refresh this. Okay, so now I can see this continuous access evaluation in the real world. It basically says denied. andre@tunk.io is not allowed. So I authenticate it, and it knows who I am, but it sees that it's not in the list of allowed email addresses. So that's pretty cool, right? But what would happen if this was a long-lasting download or something like that? I really want to clean this up. Then I also would like to revoke this session altogether, because the session's still there. Not that I can do much, but if I had a long-lasting download, then that might have still going on. So what I'll do is terminate this session, see what happens there. And again, this should be revoked in real time, and see if I do this now. Okay, now we can actually see, hey, the session's been killed. Notice how fast that was, and I'm being forced to log out, and we can start this dance over. So that is what continuous access evaluation is. Every request is continuously evaluated to see if it meets the authorization rules. Okay, cool. So we already looked a little bit at the problem of long-lived sessions, so we can change the authorization rules as we just did, but certain sessions are very long-lived. And a prime example of that are SSH sessions. So let's take a look at this demo where we have an SSH Zero Trust service. So this is an SSH Zero Trust service, and I added a custom domain to this. And actually, this is from a previous demo. If you're interested in that, look on our blog for SSH Zero Trust, and we'll continue to build that on here. But there's ssh.tunk.io, and I'll do the same thing here. So I'm going to give, so right now, only corp.com email addresses have access. So I'm going to give myself access, say andre.tunk.io, and maybe atunk@gmail.com. I only really need one, but I just want to demonstrate you can have multiple ones. Okay, so now I have given the contractor access. And basically it says, hey, Andre, I know you're here temporarily. You need access to this SSH server. Go and SSH to this server and you should have access. So naturally, I'll ask, okay, so what are the credentials? Do I have a username and password for this thing? Should I give you my SSH key so that you can upload them somehow, or put them in Puppet or Chef or whatever you're using? And actually, the nice answer is no, Andre, don't worry about that. We don't use static credentials. We only use ephemeral, short-lived credentials. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. How does that work? Well, let's take a look at a demo. So basically, I'm going to log in. Here's my shell. And it basically says, just log in as this user, test user at ssh.tunk.io, which is the Zero Trust thing. And so what happens is browser pops up. By the way, I should note I have a little MySocket.io helper client that forces this browser to pop up. I'll log in with my IDP again. And maybe for now, I'll log in with the Gmail account just to show you that I added both. And so... okay, it says you are now logged in. So let's go back to the shell and you could see that I am logged into this Ubuntu server, right? So this is a little dummy shell, but you could see that I'm logged in. And so the cool thing is I don't have keys on this system. I don't have a username and a password. Well, I have a username, but no password. And so there are no credentials to steal from me. In fact, what happened is after this was successful, this web login, I got a token, and the MySocket CTL client under the covers is using that token, got a short-lived TLS certificate to kind of open up this socket. It also retrieved short-lived SSH signed keys that are only valid for 1 minute, and that's what's being used to log in. So I don't actually know the username and password, and I don't have a key to get stolen. There's a very short-lived key, but it's only valid for 1 minute, right? Cool. So now I'm logged in, Zero Trust, no authentication. This is really, really good. But same thing. Okay, let's just double check if this session is there. So I logged in at, I don't know, was it 2:31 or so? Yeah, there we go. And in this case, I logged in with my Gmail account, right? So same thing. This is really good. Okay, so but the contractor engagement ends again. But Andre is smart. He has, so I'm going to remove these credentials. There you go. But this is a long-lived session. My SSH session will remain up for, it can remain up for days or weeks as long as it's being kept alive. But what I want as an administrator is this contractor should get out of my network. And I can't really ask him nicely to do that because I don't know if he will, right? So again, we'll go to this Sessions tab here. And in this case, I will hit the Terminate Sessions button. And I'm going to do that right now and pull this up, because I want you to see how fast this goes. So I press the button, you can see it's successful, and you could see that immediately the session was terminated. So the cool thing with this is not only was this sort of the token is revoked and all that kind of good stuff in the browser, but also we find out all the related network connections, TCP flows, and so on and so forth, and we kill all of them across all of our infrastructure. And so now I know for sure as an administrator that Andre, the contractor, no longer has access to my infrastructure. So cool, what happens if I'm smart and I'll just try again? I'll log in and says, well, sorry, dude, you no longer are allowed. And so with that, I have now successfully sort of manage the complete flow, and we have access to the sessions. I've killed it, terminated it, and so on and so forth. Cool. So we solved the problem of long-lived sessions by doing network flow termination. So looking forward, so terminating a session from the portal is cool. It kind of demonstrates what's possible. But you should also realize that all of this is possible through the API as well. So the API has all the endpoints to get all sessions for a socket, and you could also terminate it using the put HTTP function. And the cool thing there is you can make your own algorithms, you can fetch the sessions, run some analytics on it, compare it to other things that you may know. If you say, hey, this is suspicious, let's kill this session. So you can really think of MySocket now as the underlying, identity-aware firewall data plane as a service, and you can instruct exactly which sessions should be terminated and what's going on. All right, so time to wrap up. In this blog, we looked at session management. We explained a little bit again what MySocket is. We talked about continuous access evaluation and how that is unique, and each request is continuously evaluated. We saw how we do session logging, so you could see exactly in real time who is visiting what, from where, and when. And it kind of looked at how you can use either the API or the portal to fetch that information. And then finally, we demonstrated how you can also terminate sessions by either revoking cookies and sessions, but also to actually kill long-lived TCP sessions, such as SSH. So that's pretty cool. So with that, we come to the end of this demo. I hope you enjoyed it. Should you have any questions, comment, feedback, let me know, and I'm happy to chat. Thank you. Bye.